It was a moonless night, and an eerie stillness hung heavy in the air as Mary and John found themselves standing at the entrance of the forgotten cemetery. The wrought-iron gate creaked open, casting elongated shadows upon the overgrown path that led deeper into the graveyard. With trembling hands, Mary clutched John's arm, her heart pounding like a frantic drum. Their love had been a forbidden one, a secret shared only between them. Mary, the daughter of a well-respected family in the town, had fallen for John, a humble gravedigger who tended to the cemetery. Their clandestine meetings had been filled with stolen kisses under the cover of night, away from the prying eyes of the judgmental society. But tonight, their love was driving them to a place where no living soul should tread. Mary's fascination with the supernatural and her relentless curiosity had led them here, to the graveyard, in the middle of the night. She had heard rumors of a hidden crypt deep within, a crypt said to hold ancient secrets. As they ventured further into the cemetery, the temperature seemed to plummet, and a ghostly mist began to form around the tombstones. The unsettling silence was broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and their labored breaths. Suddenly, they heard a faint, mournful wail carried on the breeze. Mary clung tighter to John, her eyes darting around in terror. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. John nodded, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "It's just the wind, Mary. Let's find what we came for and leave." They approached an imposing mausoleum covered in ivy, its stone facade bearing the ravages of time. Mary pushed open the heavy, creaking door, and they stepped into the darkness within. The air was damp, and the only light came from the flickering candles they had brought. As they ventured deeper into the mausoleum, they discovered an ornate door hidden behind a tattered tapestry. It was old and covered in strange symbols. Mary recognized some from her research on the occult. With a sense of trepidation, she pushed the door open, revealing a hidden chamber adorned with ancient relics and a sarcophagus in the center. On the sarcophagus, they found a weathered tome, its pages filled with cryptic incantations. Mary's excitement grew as she realized the potential of what they had discovered. Ignoring John's protests, she began to read from the book, reciting the words with an increasing sense of urgency. Unbeknownst to them, the incantation they had unleashed awakened the restless spirits of the cemetery. In the darkness outside, the ground began to tremble, and graves began to crack open as long-buried corpses clawed their way to the surface. The moonless night filled with the mournful moans of the undead. Panicked, Mary and John tried to flee, but the chamber doors slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside. Desperation took hold as they pounded on the door, screaming for help that would never come. As the undead drew nearer, their hollow eyes fixed on the intruders, John grabbed Mary's hand. "I love you, Mary," he said, tears streaming down his face. Mary nodded, her fear transformed into a deep sense of regret. "I love you too, John." With no way out, they faced the advancing horde together, hand in hand. The undead closed in, their icy fingers reaching out. But just before they could be touched, a blinding light emanated from Mary and John, and the undead recoiled, their wails filling the chamber. The light consumed them, and the undead were forced back into their graves, the earth closing above them. The chamber door swung open, and Mary and John stumbled out into the graveyard, shaken but alive. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, they looked at each other with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They had survived the horrors of the forgotten cemetery, but they had also unleashed a darkness they could never undo. In the end, their love had triumphed over the supernatural, but at a price too steep to pay. The memory of that night haunted them, a constant reminder of the forbidden love that had led them to the brink of damnation. And so, they left the forgotten cemetery behind, its secrets buried deep within, never to be spoken of again. But they knew that the darkness they had awakened would always be there, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to claim them should they ever stray too close to its grasp. For Mary and John, their love was a beacon of light in a world filled with shadows, but they would forever carry the weight of the darkness they had unleashed that fateful midnight at the forgotten cemetery. Years passed since that fateful night at the forgotten cemetery, and Mary and John had settled into a quiet life far from the town that held their forbidden love and the horrors they had unleashed. They had married in secret, their love only deepening with time, but the memory of that night remained etched in their souls like a permanent scar. They had tried to move on, to bury the past along with the secrets of the cemetery. But the darkness they had awakened had a long reach, and it was not so easily forgotten. Strange occurrences began to plague their lives. Late at night, they would hear the mournful wails of the undead in the distance, a haunting reminder of the horrors they had faced. Shadows would dance in the corners of their vision, and they would catch glimpses of ghostly figures out of the corner of their eyes. Their once peaceful home became a place of dread, as the supernatural forces they had unwittingly summoned seemed determined to torment them. Mary's fascination with the occult had turned into an obsession as she searched for a way to banish the darkness once and for all. One stormy night, as lightning lit up the sky and thunder shook their home, Mary discovered an old ritual hidden in the same tome that had brought them to the cemetery. It promised to seal the rift they had opened and put an end to the relentless torment. With trembling hands, they gathered the necessary ingredients and returned to the forgotten cemetery, the place where it all began. The gravestones loomed like silent sentinels in the inky darkness, and the air was thick with an otherworldly chill. Mary and John reached the chamber once more, the memory of their previous visit haunting them with every step. They placed the ingredients on the sarcophagus and began the ritual, reciting the incantation with a sense of urgency. As they chanted, the ground trembled once more, and the undead began to rise from their graves, drawn to the source of the incantation. But this time, Mary and John were prepared. They held hands, the same love that had saved them before now serving as a shield against the malevolent forces. The ritual reached its climax, and a blinding light engulfed the chamber. The undead recoiled once more, their wails drowned out by the power of the incantation. The rift that had been opened years ago began to close, sealing the darkness within. With a final burst of energy, Mary and John completed the ritual, and the light consumed them. When it faded, they found themselves standing outside the chamber, the cemetery eerily silent once more. Their hearts were heavy, and their faces were etched with exhaustion, but they knew they had done what was necessary. The darkness had been banished, and the tormented souls of the cemetery could finally rest in peace. Mary and John returned home, their love stronger than ever, but they knew that they would carry the scars of that night with them for the rest of their lives. They had faced the horrors of the forgotten cemetery and emerged victorious, but at a cost too great to bear. As they watched the sun rise on the horizon, they knew that their love would always be a beacon of light in a world filled with shadows. And though the memory of that night would haunt them, they had found a way to confront the darkness and emerge from it, hand in hand, together.